If you're a small mouse enjoyer, the Vaxee XE-S might be a fantastic place to go. In this video, I'm going to share my thoughts of using this mouse. I used it for a few months and I recently used it again for about a week, and I am really enjoying this mouse again. And I forgot kind of how much I liked it, despite the fact that it does have some features that for me are normally things I don't go for. And we're going to talk about that in this video. Okay, so let's get some stuff out of the way with. Build quality. Don't have to talk about it really. It feels great. This is a Vaxee made mouse, and so all of the standards for quality you would expect and quality control are fantastic. So no complaints there with quite a lot of usage, and it feels as good as new, to be honest, after a few months. So they did a great job with that. It's got the typical specs and features that you would expect as well. We don't have to talk too much about that. 4K sensor, you've got 100 hours plus of wireless use, and you also have the 60-gram weight, which is distributed pretty uniformly. So it actually feels to me lighter than the MZ1, which is the same overall weight, but with the MZ1, the distribution is more towards the mid and the back. And so the MZ1, it feels a little bit wonky in some cases. For some people, and myself included, sometimes I consider that an advantage with the weight placement just for control purposes. But I actually like with this mouse that it feels uniform because it makes the 60 grams feel lighter than I'm used to. Now, shape is obviously the most important thing, so most of this video will be about shape, and we're going to start here by comparing it to some other shapes and using that comparison as a discussion point as to how the hump size and how it tapers off, how some of these things might impact the feel and just the aiming in general. So the GPX is a great reference point to start with. Very familiar shape. It is a medium-sized mouse, but it's a very familiar shape that everybody, I think, has come into contact with at some point. Over 60% of pros, I think, still use it in tier 1 events, so it is so popular in esports. The GPX does simply not work for me. It's too large. I get no space in the back. I get no space at the top. So it forces me to use this palm grip, and I have no play with my fingers. So that just is a no-go for me. And so for a long time, I was looking for, with my 19x8 hands, I was looking for something that was like a GPX but smaller. I eventually found the Maya, and the Maya kind of is that. You can see on the shape there, it's very similar. It's just a bit shorter, it's a little less tall, and you get a bit more space in the back. And so the Maya ended up being a great option there. It can kind of fill my hand out in like the right places, but still have enough play and enough room at the top of the hand and also at the back that I can kind of do a lot with the fingers. So a lot of extra finger manipulation. So really good mouse for that kind of style of grip. The Razer Viper Mini is another huge favorite of mine. It might be top 2. It's like top 2, top 3 conversation always for me. And the reason is because it's just like it's wearing a corset. You get this is my favorite part of it, is that it tapers in the middle. So you get your fingers closer to the center by the sensor. So that's really nice for control. I'm generally flicking a lot from my fingers. What some people will do is they will actually use the contact points around with these like knuckles here, and they will use that to help them flick, do their wrist flick. Because you can see, like, I'm not using any fingers here. I can just apply a little bit of pressure to the top of the mouse, which is usually your hand resting on it with the claw grip. And then I can just I'm trying to not use my fingers here. You can still move the mouse. You're getting a bit of extra power from that. Whereas I like really pull from the fingers a lot when I tend to flick. And so this helps me a lot, this narrower middle around the sensor. So I love that about the Mini, but otherwise it's a very similar shape to the Maya. The only thing with the Mini is you can see that it's a bit higher at the top, and then it kind of more aggressively comes down. So it's really the only major difference. Now, if we look at the XE-S in comparison, it's similar, but just overall smaller profile, lower profile, and it's just a smoother curve, especially if you compare it to the Viper Mini. You can see here, the Viper Mini is like a bit more aggressive in how the shape differs. But I feel like the Vaxee XE-S really conforms like really nicely, to quite universally almost, to a lot of different hand sizes. The interesting thing though is because it's so small, you don't have to use this space for like, pressing your hand into it. You could actually fingertip it, but at the same time, it's still not too small that you also can't actually get full contact with your hand and have it feel still quite nice. And I think for that reason, this mouse is super versatile. So a really interesting thing here for me, comparing it with the Starlight 12 small shape, which many of you will understand who know my content. I've been using this for years. I love this shape. It's one of my favorite shapes. I just have issues with stability with it. That's my main problem. But when I did this overlay, I was like, wow, this is really, really similar. This surprised me a lot. Now, one thing that's also super shocking to me is that the width of the XE-S is 64 millimeters and the GPX Superlight 2 is 63.5. I was like, wait, what? It's actually thicker, wider than the GPX, a medium-sized mouse. That's kind of wild. And that really shocked me because it didn't feel like that. So I had started to ask the questions, why is that the case? So one of the things that's interesting about the difference of these two shapes, despite a similarity in size, is you can't really see it in the image. It's the way that this flares out on the outsides, whereas the Starlight 12 kind of just like drops straight down on the edges. And so that actually provides a meaningful difference to me, because when I try to use this mouse, I get contact around all this part of the mouse. Whereas with the Starlight 12, I get contact with like all of these parts around the side. It's all just pad, all friction on the pad. So lots of extra friction points with my hand on the pad. And so, that's going to be preference to some extent. But for me, I'm like, wow, this actually feels really nice because I get some of that extra stability you get on those bigger mice because of how it flares out, but I'm still not losing all this space at the top or the back. And I can still have the option to kind of like get a claw that almost feels like a palm, where I'm making so much contact here. I get to leave a little bit of space at the top, and it gives me this like ability to maneuver it with the fingers quite nicely. And the one trade-off is like, okay, yeah, it's quite wide, so it does not feel as good in the width as the Starlight 12. I just can't get over how much I love the narrowness of this Starlight 12 shape. But I'm willing to make the trade-off because I get these extra contact points, and you can actually use the extra contact points to aid the wrist flicks. So you can see that you can actually flick with just the knuckles of the hand without the fingers. Usually my flicking comes entirely from the fingers on the side, and that's usually where all my flicking comes from. But you can be creative if you have more contact points and where you put the pressure, and you can kind of use a little bit of assistance there as well. So I've been trying to learn to do that a little bit, and that's been really fantastic in terms of how I can use this mouse. It's very versatile. This feels like a very versatile mouse. There's lots of ways you can use it. Because of the low profile, you could come like fully fingertip this if you wanted to. You can fully fingertip it. Also, you can fully palm it too if you want to. It feels really good because of the curvature of it. It feels very natural for that. So you can kind of use it with any grip if you have a smaller hand. So that's a really interesting thing that I noted. The one downside for me with this mouse is that I love to use a glass pad. And with a glass pad, I actually like the fact that I make all of these contact points around the side. With this mouse, I get my fingers like underneath it, and I get all these contact points. I get all of these techniques unlocked where I can use my fingers and my hand to kind of provide stoppage and extra control for flicks. So it allows me to benefit from the glass and add a bit of extra control with sort of a mastery over these like friction points of my hand. Whereas I lose that with this mouse, and so I don't have enough control with this mouse on glass. But that's why I've got cloth up here. With cloth, it's pretty nice. This is an Artisan Raiden Mid, so I would definitely pretty recommend cloth, maybe not going glass. I'd be interested to see like what people's performance is with glass on this. I would expect that you probably have some control issues unless you use a very slow sense, but even still, you're going to get a bit of drift on the micros after for the micro corrections. So something to bear in mind, I would say. One of the things I haven't talked about, which is a benefit of larger mice or mice that have these humps that are a bit bigger, is kind of how it elevates your hand. Because depending on your technique, let's say I to use this as a more extreme example, if I try to use this mouse, you can see that my hand is kind of resting above the pad like naturally, and I actually have to plant my wrist if I want to use my wrist. That's something that I can do, or I can have to put my wrist further back on the mouse so it can always make contact, so I can do these like wrist movements. But then I can just very easily, and this is why I think people love the bigger hump at the back, you can very easily just unlock the arm by just raising this a little bit and putting a bit more weight on the back here, and suddenly I just unlock the arm movements. And if your arm is elevated more, or your hand is elevated more because of the mouse itself, arm becomes a lot easier to do. So if you're a big arm person, you're using a very slow sense, I think that's having these bigger humps at the back is a really huge benefit for that. But the problem is obviously you're going to lose potentially some of that those wrist options. So it's just something to bear in mind in terms of the trade-offs. And this is kind of why I think this mouse is really interesting, because I actually think this mouse kind of gives you a bit of everything. And for a smaller handed player, I don't think that's super common. So definitely I think a mouse that is worth a consideration. And as I play some of these clips and give you my final thoughts, For me, I'm actually going to be trying this mouse out a bit again because I really want to get some experience on this Raiden Mid. It's a pad that was recommended to me by like Minigod, Viscose, and Matty. And I'm like, okay, God, if you guys are all recommending this pad, I probably should try it. I'm still a glass fanatic. I think I'll always be a glass user. And so I don't think that's ever going to change. But ultimately, I'm going to give it a go and see how this works and what I can learn from using this mouse and trying to see how it impacts my aim and my aiming technique. Because that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed with experimentation is it gives you the opportunity to develop new skills that you can kind of bring back to whatever your mains are. And it often ends up being the case that you improve your overall skill from having learned some of these extra different techniques. So a lot of fun to be had with the experimentation. I hope this review was interesting for you guys. If it was, let me know. I'll definitely do more like this with other mice. I've had some companies reach out to send me stuff, so I'd love to do more reviews for you. So let me know how you feel about it, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Cheers.